Last week, I ripped the scab off the fake news network known as CNN. Well, tonight, we need to do the same thing. This time, for the Australian taxpayer-funded propaganda outfit known as the ABC. Now, the ABC's got a budget of over $1 billion per annum, but they've got no commercial pressures. Instead, they've effectively got a nationwide pulpit from which they like to preach the gospel of wokeness. And that gospel includes a thinly veiled loathing of conservative voices and ideals. And in fact, given their perpetual criticism of the values, the ideas, and the people who have actually built this nation, some would make the case that the ABC actually loathes Australia too. I mean, we're repeatedly told about our failures in all the areas that apparently matter to the national broadcaster. Aboriginal affairs, rainbow activism, transgender children, climate change nonsense, and assorted other topics from the cesspool of cultural Marxism. But it is their treatment of conservative ideals and the people that espouse them that I find particularly gratuitous. Consider for a moment the lot of Liberal MP Nicole Flint. Now, she was harassed by a political stalker and subject to vile sexist abuse during her campaign. Now, if she was a lefty, the ABC would have been batting in her corner. Instead, they find ways to broadcast and reinforce the smears made by her opponents. So when that vile creature known as Mike Carlton put his ravings about Flint into the Twitterverse, the ABC saw fit to promote them during a discussion about terrible domestic violence. Never have I admired Jimmy Barnes so much as tonight. How does he not leap from his seat and strangle the Liberal shill on his right? Hashtag Q&A. Or hashtag inappropriate, I reckon, because the Liberal shill that Carlton was referring to was actually Nicole Flint. And incredibly, Jimmy Barnes was talking about his own experience of horrific domestic abuse at the time. However, the licence to abuse conservative women gets much closer to home than, say, just one of the ABC's tragic favourite keyboard warriors. One of its employees, and that's the acerbic radio broadcaster Peter Gers, thought it was okay to mock Flint's appearance and her clothing. Now, had he done this about one of the ABC's pet progressives, let's say Magda Zabansky or Amanda Vanstone or perhaps Julia Gillard, the outcry would have deafened us all. Instead, because the target was a conservative woman, the only outrage is about Flint being outraged. How dare she be so sensitive? Oh, the ABC broadcast as much when discussing Flint's political plight on their flagship propaganda program. Their guest on this occasion, Samantha Maiden. And she acknowledged that Flint had been called a whore, but just because you're criticised as a female MP, it does not make it sexist. Maiden went on to also question Flint's stalking claims and the statement of police reports and demanded that Flint correct parliamentary evidence. Now, the other program guest, Shalila Medora, from the other taxpayer-funded propaganda outfit known as SBS, wholeheartedly agreed. Well, why should we be surprised at that? Both of these people appear ignorant of the fact that an order was made concerning stalking by Mr. David Walsh. Now, it's no coincidence that that police order stopped the stalking, which, according to the ABC pundits on that show, never really happened. Just like the abusive graffiti on Flint's windows in her campaign office, which were deeply, deeply sexist and offensive, were not really sexist attacks. They were just legitimate criticism. It is noteworthy that a contrasting view is not included on the Insider's anti-conservative echo chamber on their ABC. But why would that surprise us? The ABC, of course, haven't really cared about maintaining their requirement by law to present both sides of the argument. I mean, they're even required by law to broadcast parliamentary proceedings, which perhaps does give them some claim to the fact that they air all sides of the argument, except they don't always do that. In what must be one of the biggest coincidences of all time, just as the same MP, Nicole Flint, was imploring the ABC to get out of the Canberra bubble And immediately after uttering the words "sexual abuse is accepted" during the parliamentary broadcast, the broadcast itself was interrupted. Well, I prefer to say it was actually censored. And the censorship included Flint being talked over by the ABC host, and then over 20 seconds of radio silence. It's called dead air.
So I say to the ABC, get out of the Canberra bubble, get out of the Sydney and Melbourne CBDs, get out to the regions to cover the stories of women like Sharong Long, who I never want to hear say the following words again, and I quote, "We have to live with an Aboriginal rape culture. Sexual abuse is accepted as normal.
With apologies to Nicole Flint for the interruption. Just a few seconds to go before the House adjourns. That's all from us for this evening.
Well, we're deeply sorry for the interruption. Of course you are. No, you're not. You're not sorry at all. You've interrupted someone who is talking about, in our parliamentary chamber, about something that is very, very important to a lot of people, and instead you've interrupted it and given us some dead air time. Well, fortunately for the ABC broadcast unit, the broadcast managed to resume just as Flint concluded her remarks about their ABC and how they're not...
I apologise to Nicole Flint for interrupting her speech. Well, let's have a look at one of the main topics we've been discussing today.
Well, these are just some of the instances of how the national broadcaster is playing favourites, and it is pushing an agenda rather than a news service. It is failing to comply with its charter and its obligation to report to all Australians fairly and with integrity. Now, for $20 million every week of our money, I'd like to say we should expect much better than this. Unfortunately, it is what we've come to expect from our very own taxpayer-funded, anti-Australian ABC.